You all know that I love a suitcase flip. I have painted so many suitcases, making stackers, tables, and the lot. Let's take this little one and transform it into something special. I found this one at my local thrift store for $8, and that is a steal. It is pretty big and actually not in bad condition. First things first, we are going to rip out that lining. Yes, we're just going to rip it out. Did you know that majority of these old vintage suitcases are made from wood inside? Sometimes you can save the interior, but on this piece, I needed to rip it out. It was sad and stained. So in today's video, I will be also showing you not only how to transform the outside of a suitcase, but I'm going to show you my famous method for transforming the inside of a suitcase. And guess what? It takes nothing but a glue gun. Nothing is going to be sewn on the inside. And when you rip out the interior of these suitcases, you also get rid of that stinky, musty smell. So it is a double win-win. I will clean the outside and inside of this suitcase with White Lightning, making sure that it's nice, fresh, and clean. I'm also going to remove any broken bits or pieces from the outside of this piece. There were a couple spots on the outside where there was a little bit of missing metal at a place on the front where there was a nameplate, as well as something on the side. So remove any little bits of metal that are already broken or need to come off. Even though the interior is made of wood, the exterior has an old plastic vinyl. That means you're going to have to prepare your piece with a little bit of bonding boss. And my bonding boss will work double duty today since it also helps block any smells. If your suitcase is kind of stinky, this is going to lock in that smell so it does not stink anymore. I like to apply my bonding boss with a roller so I can just chuck it in the bin after I'm finished. Applying 2 even coats, waiting approximately 2 to 4 hours in between coats of bonding boss. Now don't forget you do need to wait 24 hours for your bonding boss to cure before you begin to paint. And since this is a gripping primer, I am also going to paint over top of any metal or plastic on the suitcase. So plan to paint the entire thing in bonding boss. And just so you know, if it does smell on the inside, you can use this on the interior as well. This white base is also super helpful when it comes to painting. You're going to use less amounts of paint on your project when you've primed the entire piece with bonding boss. But this piece is actually not going to be painted that much at all. I'm actually going to cover majority of this project in a decoupage paper. While my suitcase gets dry, let's work on creating a base for this table. I found this small table in my shed. You can tell it's been in there a little bit way too long with the amount of sawdust that's sitting on top of it, but we're going to chop it up and make it fit the base of this suitcase. So this table is actually constructed fairly simply. On the interior, I can remove those brackets, chop up the side of the table itself, and then make it shorter to fit my suitcase. This will actually be a table that I can drill my case down onto to hold it steady. So really, it just stayed the same. I just took those 2 side pieces of wood and made them smaller in measurement to fit the bottom of my suitcase. For today's project, we will be adding decoupage paper as well as a couple light colors as a base for our work. And since I want my paper to absolutely pop, I am going to paint a nice neutral base. This color is called Gardenia. Gardenia is just like a light, creamy, taupey color. That means when I adhere my paper on top, it is going to just pop right off the surface. It's going to look so good. If you have a dark paper like this cow Highland paper and you did a dark color, you're going to really muddy up the image that's in the center. So I suggest staying light and then painting in the edges dark to match your paper. You will also need some plastic wrap as well as a chip brush and also your medium that you use to adhere your piece. For me, I like to use a satin clear coat on my project to push the paper down and stick it on. Step number 1 is going to completely cover the surface where I'm going to be putting the paper down with my satin clear coat. I go a little heavy-handed, making sure to cover the entire top piece of my suitcase. Second step would be to cut your image to size, but for this project, I'm actually going to be using the whole entire thing and painting the edges in. So I'm going to wet the back of my paper with a little bit of water. I use a spray misting bottle to spray the back of the image, and this will help it become a little bit stretchy. And then you lay your paper down right on top of your wet satin clear coat. This is where that little plastic wrap comes in. I take my ball of plastic wrap and I use that to smooth the paper out and get rid of any wrinkles. Using my saran wrap as a tool to push out the wrinkles helps keep all of the image color correct. If you were to come in here with a paintbrush and really manipulate and push your image around, you might take the chance that you're going to move some of the ink that's printed on the rice paper. So this is kind of a great way to smooth out any wrinkles and get it nice and ready on your piece. After that has completely dried 100%, I can cut it with a knife to fit the edges perfectly. Next up, we're going to add a different paper to the sides of this project. Both these papers have brown tones and they look really well together. They match perfectly. So I'm going to cut up the size of the edge of my suitcase. So this paper will actually run the entire diameter around the suitcase. Applying this paper in the same manner as I did the top piece, but working in sections. So you can see how I am pushing it down and around all of the buckles and cutting it to fit the buckles and the sizing. And not opening the suitcase until it's dry, because once it's dry, you can use a sharp knife to cut around the edge so the suitcase can open, and also around all of the metal brackets. I found that it's easier to work in that manner rather than trying to cut out the little holes before you lay your paper down. This way I can come in and fix up any of the edges and reseal it once again with my satin clear coat. I used my Terra clay paint as well as a couple of other tones from the Dixie Belle chalk mineral paint line to paint in the edges of this cow paper and make it disappear. Once it's dry, you're not really going to see where the seam is and where it ends. I used some Umber Silk Alamo Mineral Paint to paint in the edges of the suitcase. To be honest, after this part was done, I thought I probably should have done it a little bit lighter because I will add wax over top and it will look like old leather. I used a couple of different browns for the base, tapping on the color to really create a nice textured vibe for the suitcase to sit on. I also added gold to any spot where the metal hardware was located, and the gold was done in Gilding Wax in antique gold. All right, let's work on the interior of your project. This took approximately 2 yards of material. I had a little bit left over, but just so you know, the interior of a medium-sized suitcase will be about 2 yards. For this part of the project, you can use cardstock that's heavy, or you can also use foam board as well. Both work well to hold the material nice and flat on the inside of the suitcase. I traced this piece of cardstock to fit the inside top and the inside bottom of my suitcase. The next step, again, super easy, no sew process. It's just using a spray adhesive. I'm going to spray the actual piece of cardstock and then smooth the material down onto this piece. It doesn't matter what it looks like on the back end of the process because the back part will be totally covered when you either put it into the top or the bottom of the suitcase. So spray your cardstock, push your material out and get it nice and smooth. You could also press your material. This did have a small line in it from the fold, but you can't see it at the end. If you don't have spray adhesive, you can also do this with a glue gun. I just find it's harder with the glue gun to get it nice and even. So for the side part of the interior of the suitcase, you're just going to kind of measure the area and get a little bit extra fabric, if that makes sense. It doesn't need to be exact because you're going to be tucking the top piece over top of the side piece. I'm going to fold over the edge so I have a nice smooth edge, and I'm going to use my glue gun to create that seam on the edge that will adhere on the inside part of the suitcase. And then I had to stop and take a step backwards. So when you open up your suitcase, you will see the top lip. This just happens to be a folded over piece of vinyl. The color is black, which I could have left, but I didn't like the look of it compared to the material. So I ended up using my Gilding Wax to completely cover that interior vinyl lip of my suitcase. Because that is the lip where you're going to then take your folded over piece of material and hot glue gun it onto your suitcase. I know this is not the professional way to do things, and listen, there's probably 11 billion suitcase tutorials here on YouTube, but this one is the easiest for me to achieve, and I've relined many different suitcases in this manner, and it holds up great. So keep going, adding your glue to the piece of material and then securing it to the sides of the suitcase. And you will end up with something that looks a little bit like this. Again, not finished yet because the material that we cut and put over the paper is actually going to sit into the base and also sit into the top. I repeated the same process around the top piece and then secured in my piece of cardstock. The cardstock wasn't as strong as, say, using my foam board, which I'm used to, but they didn't have any foam board for me at the dollar store. Using your hot glue to secure that top piece and bottom piece down as well. I went over the entire project one more time with my satin clear coat just to make sure that it looks really good and the paper is sealed in on every single edge that I've cut out. And then I added some waxes in brown, in black, and gold. And this little table was finished. I secured it from the interior before I put down the base of my fabric material so it hides the screws, and the table is finished. This suitcase went from boring and broken and discarded at my local thrift store to a brand new showcase piece of furniture with an added bonus of storage on the inside. And I can guarantee you that nobody else is going to have this style of suitcase table in their home. It is definitely a one-of-a-kind piece with that beautiful Highland Cow paper. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I will see you next week with a new video.